Are women to blame for woke culture? In this video, I want to talk about the Great Feminization theory. Helen Andrews wrote an article about this recently, which exploded because she touched on something real. Her thesis is simple. She calls it the tipping point theory. When an institution reaches a majority of women, the rules of engagement shift from masculine norms to feminine norms. And when that happens, the behaviors that are rewarded change and the behaviors that are punished change. Everything you think of as wokeness involves prioritizing the feminine over the masculine, empathy over rationality, safety over risk, cohesion over competition. At first, this changes how people speak to each other. Then it changes who gets hired and who gets promoted. And eventually, it takes over universities, workplaces, journalism, and even the law. The final consequence isn't merely political correctness. The final consequence is the destruction of meritocracy and objective truth. So what are feminine norms and why do they produce woke behavior? In her book, Warriors and Warriors, The Survival of the Sexes, Joyce Benenson explains that men and women had to evolve different survival strategies because they were solving for different reproductive and survival problems. And that means that they developed profoundly different ways of competing and cooperating. Male cooperation looks like this. Men are generally more comfortable with open hierarchy. They're more tolerant of direct orders and open disagreement. And they're able to cooperate even if they don't necessarily like each other. But this flips the moment feminine norms take hold. In Helen's words, female group dynamics favor consensus and cooperation. Men order each other around, but women can only suggest and persuade. Any criticism or negative sentiment, if it absolutely must be expressed, needs to be buried in layers of compliments. The outcome of a discussion is less important than the fact that a discussion was held and everyone participated in it. These strategies developed for small, intimate groups, but large institutions can't be organized like a friendship circle or a small family. They need impersonal rules, open disagreement, hierarchy, objective standards, competition, and they need people willing to suffer a little bit of discomfort to say what they need to. An institution that elevates feelings over facts necessarily begins to suppress disruptive truths. Eventually, the truth becomes less important than how the truth makes people feel. So even the ways that women cooperate can become destructive if they're misplaced or unbalanced. Policing speech, groupthink, DEI mandates, virtue signaling, all of these map on to feminine norms of cooperation. And so what are the ways women compete? This maps on exactly to what I like to call the guillotine of wokeism, cancel culture. This is reputation destruction and social exclusion. The assumption that women aren't aggressive is a misconception. They're aggressive. They're just subtle about it. And the ultimate form of feminine aggression is to ruin someone's reputation so thoroughly that they're excommunicated from the tribe. It's destroying someone's good name and livelihood because they stepped out of line. It's someone who gets smeared on social media. It's someone whose whole legacy gets wiped out because of one politically incorrect comment. And it's someone who gets fired because they weren't inclusive enough. It might not be a physical punch in the face, but it sure knocks the wind out of them. It might not leave them bedridden because they got beat up, but it will leave them bedridden just the same. This is why in our woke culture, people are terrified of saying what they believe. Cancel culture is simply mean girl gossip formalized by the internet and HR departments. A perfect example of how this happens within an organization is James Damore getting fired from Google because, wait for it, he stated objective biological facts. He wrote a memo explaining that the reason that there are less women in STEM positions isn't due to discrimination, but rather due to differences in interest and the distribution of aptitude at the far right tail of the bell curve, not discrimination. You can call what happened to him woke culture, and you'd be right, but the way he was fired was so utterly feminine. People teaming up through back channels to claim that he created a hostile working environment and that he's sexist and the usual woke rhetoric. There's a very dark energy here.
Has brought out the worst in women. That crowd can be extremely aggressive and violent and vicious, right? I feel that a lot of the emotions that dominate the progressive left are not just girly emotions, fury and a malign intent, an intent toward destruction and harm. It's very, very negative.
Now, cancel culture doesn't need to destroy everyone. It only needs to destroy enough people that everyone else learns the lesson. You hang someone in the public square and everyone falls in line. Now, women are higher on average in agreeableness and neuroticism. Agreeableness makes you reluctant to cause conflict, and it makes you want to avoid saying anything that will make you seem not nice or, heaven forbid, mean. And neuroticism makes you more sensitive to threat and negative emotion. So that fear of being ostracized runs deep. Put those two traits together and you have a culture where people are very afraid to offend and very ready to be offended themselves. And that hypersensitivity is what makes women the natural advocates of bans on hate speech, which is basically speech restriction. You can see this most clearly in academia, where the consequences of restricting speech destroy the very purpose of academia itself, which is the pursuit of objective truth. You have fields that are female dominant. You have female university presidents, and you have a heavy layer of administrators and bureaucrats that are majority female, who all prioritize emotional safety. This has led to trigger warnings and safe spaces and the idea that words are violence. This is why speakers who are controversial or have triggering ideas are canceled from speaking at universities, lest they offend or traumatize someone. Groups of students band together and manipulate the staff who cower to the demands every time. And if all else fails, they'll publicly shame the speaker, like what happened at Stanford during a commencement speech given by the CEO of Google.
I must warn you all, this is only the
Students decided he wasn't fit to speak because Google was working on a project with Israel and the US and involved with immigration agencies. So they walked out on his speech. When I was researching this whole thing, I Googled, "I feel triggered student and lecture," and the Gemini results were hilarious. Step out of the lecture hall quietly to take a physical break and let your nervous system reset. Focus on your breathing, ground yourself. Email your professor, connect with campus support. These kids need something hard to happen in their lives because this isn't good for them. You can't make this stuff up. Now, let's talk about DEI. On the face of it, the feminine instinct to care is good, right? No, it's not. Caring is great, but you don't hire someone because you care about them. And you don't hire them because you want to virtue signal to everyone about how nice you are. Enforcing everything and everyone to be equal isn't nice. It's Marxist, but that's for a different video. That word fair is important because people on the left and the right define it differently. In his book, The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt showed that Liberals define fairness as equality, everyone getting an equal share. Conservatives define fairness as justice, everyone getting what they earned. And women, as you probably already have guessed, lean more liberal. Murdoch showed this in a popular article where you can see women skew to the left and that the gap between men and women is growing. So with a liberal, feminine definition of fairness, you naturally get DEI. DEI begins with the assumption that unequal outcomes are evidence of unfairness. Once that assumption is accepted, institutions begin to engineer equal outcomes. Hiring and promotions are no longer based on competence, but on quotas and equal representation of minorities. And this, my friends, is where meritocracy goes to die. Here's another related female hallmark. Women hate seeing other women shine. Any woman who speaks too confidently or succeeds too openly or just refuses to downplay herself risks becoming socially threatening. And because things need to be fair and equal, any woman who dares to shine is breaking the unwritten social contract. So she's expected to downplay her accomplishments and soften her confidence. She must make herself appear non-threatening and constantly reassure everyone that she doesn't think that she's better than them. And if she doesn't, the group cuts her down with gossip, exclusion, or reputation attacks. They'll call her arrogant, difficult, selfish, not a team player. And in woke culture, this is exactly the same mechanism that rewards people for becoming victims and makes everyone hurry to claim their own victim badges. And so here's the thing. Women don't learn to downplay their achievements because of men. They learn to do it because of other women. This, by the way, is one of the reasons women hate having female bosses.
Here's a secret that everyone knows, but no one's allowed to talk about. Working for a female boss sucks, especially if you're a girl. Everyone always talks about the patriarchy keeping them down. Smash the patriarchy. The patriarchy is the only thing that has ever promoted me. Ask any girl when you're just having a casual conversation and she's not being a feminazi if she would rather work for a male or a female. And she will tell you. And why? Because women are jealous. Women are moody. Women are insecure. And for some reason, they take all of that out on the women working for them. Because women are mean to each other. We are our own worst enemies. And maybe, just maybe, it's because women aren't meant to spend their childbearing years in a corporate workplace. But we're not allowed to say that. You can't sit with us!
The clearest place to see what happens when feminine norms govern an institution is by examining the doctrines of the dreaded HR department.
HR is not your friend. The sooner you understand that, the better.
HR presents itself as protecting employees, but in reality, its first purpose is protecting the organization from risk. But on the face of it, the culture it creates is built around niceness, emotional safety, and social harmony. And competence is no longer enough. Employees must also be agreeable, non-threatening, and socially approved.
It doesn't matter how good you are at your job. If nobody likes you, you are not getting promoted.
This is exactly how feminine norms trump masculine norms. Men are willing to tolerate an abrasive person who's exceptional in his field. They may dislike him, they may argue with him, but if he helps the group succeed, they will value and respect him. But for most women, being pleasant outweighs objective competence. The exceptional, blunt employee becomes a liability, and the mediocre, agreeable employee becomes management material. Then we have the infantilization of the workplace. The maternal instinct misplaced. HR's job becomes protecting employees' feelings and minimizing risk. And so language becomes obsessively policed, lest it cause offense or pose a legal risk.
Explaining to one adult at work why you don't ask another adult at work if they're on Ozempic.
The way she says this is condescending, and it implies that the adults need to be babied, like children in kindergarten who won't play nice. It's no accident that many women who push woke culture are childless and projecting their maternal instincts onto adults and employees and the like. They create a suffocating, politically correct work culture where the free flow of ideas is impossible. This necessarily stunts innovation. And Joyce Benenson showed that when boys were given a task, they argued openly until it was done. Now, this type of exchange is considered offensive or frat boy culture or toxic bro culture today. But men compete openly and ruthlessly, expressing their opinions and readily disagreeing. And when someone is seen to be superior in his competence, other men don't tear him down. They respect him because they know that if he is in their group or organization, they are more likely to win. And calling all of this a product of the patriarchy has made our society at large enforce a deeply anti-male culture, which you can see as early as school. It's created institutions in which traditionally male ways of communicating and competing and joking and solving problems are treated as inherently hostile. The archetype that encapsulates this suffocating feminine energy is the devouring mother. You see this in the workplace, in the university, and in everything woke touches. The feminine energy that's supposed to be loving, caring, and nurturing just becomes destructive.
You've worked so hard, Giant, but you'll always be my little baby. Let Mother take care of you now. Isn't that better?
A great movie example of this castrating feminine force can be seen in the Star Wars movie, The Last Jedi. The Vice Admiral of the Rebellion is a woman, and the rebels are all a diverse collection of DI hires. And when the male character disagrees, he's shunned and dismissed like a child. Another way reputation destruction becomes institutionalized is through the threat of lawsuits. Even where women do not hold the top spots, women set the tone in these organizations such that a male CEO must operate within the limits set by his human resources VP. Here's an example of a woman explaining how to use the language of risk and compliance to manipulate the system.
Do you want HR to listen to you? I'm going to tell you a little dirty secret. HR isn't moved by emotion. They are moved by risk. So if you want your concerns taken seriously, you need to use language that signals liability and not feelings. So instead of saying, I feel uncomfortable, you would say, this is affecting my psychological safety. Instead of saying, they're being mean to me, you would say, I'm concerned about a hostile work environment. Once terms like psychological safety and hostile work environment hit the record, ignoring you becomes a risk that they don't want. Documentation turns your experience into evidence, and evidence forces accountability. This isn't being dramatic, it's being smart in a system designed to protect the company and not you.
Essentially, how to threaten the company in a way that sounds almost victim-like. Even when a woman sues and loses, the company still pays in legal fees, time, and most importantly, public reputation. Like with a female employee, Ellen Poe, or Poe, who sued the VC fund she was working at for discrimination in not promoting her. Maybe you just weren't good enough at your job, but she didn't win. But that didn't stop the news articles praising her for tackling sex discrimination. The money isn't even the issue. It's having the organization's name dragged through the mud. The restriction of free speech does not remain constrained within universities or workplaces. Eventually, it changes what the entire public accepts as true. Helen Andrews points to the New York Times as one of the clearest examples of an institution reaching the demographic tipping point. In 2018, the Times staff became majority female. Today, women make up roughly 55% of the staff. This means that the filter of information is no longer objective, but it's ruled by an inherently feminine lens. And this matters because the New York Times doesn't merely report the news. It helps determine which stories receive national attention, which interpretations become respectable, and which facts enter public consciousness. So when its reporting becomes increasingly based on feelings and emotional narratives and the avoidance of offense, it doesn't merely change the tone of journalism. It changes how reality is filtered for the public. This is how wokeness has taken over mainstream media. And this isn't just a theory. In the study, The Rise and Fall of Rationality in Language, Martin Scheffer and his colleagues found that language associated with rationality began declining everywhere around 1980, while language associated with emotion and intuition increased. And the shift accelerated sharply around 2007. And the same pattern appeared in New York Times articles. You can see the difference when comparing older and newer political reporting. The older article is organized around growth rates, measurable outcomes, and election predictions. The newer articles are organized around anxiety, emotional atmosphere, identity, political vibes, and auras of all things. And again, these articles are not cherry-picked. They illustrate the same broader pattern that the researchers found across decades of language. Once emotional consensus becomes a moral standard, inconvenient facts become socially dangerous. Journalists begin asking not only whether something is true, but whether publishing it could offend the wrong group or undermine the accepted narrative. And anyone who challenges that narrative risks social punishment. Bari Weiss is one of the clearest examples. As Andrews writes, in her letter of resignation from the New York Times, Bari Weiss described how colleagues referred to her in internal Slack messages as a racist, a Nazi, and a bigot, and this is the most feminine part. Colleagues perceived to be friendly with me were badgered by coworkers. This is reputation destruction and social exclusion inside the newsroom. Attack the dissenter, pressure anyone associated with her, and everyone else learns to remain silent. Once people see that an unpopular opinion can cost them their friendships, reputation, and career, they begin censoring themselves. And because the New York Times helps define the boundaries of respectable public opinion, that internal group dynamic eventually affects the entire culture. But journalism isn't even the most serious institution that Andrews is concerned about. The institution with the greatest power is the law. The legal system can take your money, your rights, your freedom, and your future. And the demographic trajectory of the legal profession is changing quickly. Women became a majority of students in law schools in 2016. Judges are still majority male, but within a generation, that balance may reverse. So why is this a problem? Because Western common law is based on objective evidence, rational judgment, due process, and equality before the law. The concern is what happens when a feelings-centered institutional culture begins replacing those impersonal standards. You can see this growing emphasis on emotional experience in academic works such as Matthew Flinder's Why Feelings Trump Facts, which argues that politics and public policy need to take emotion more seriously. But understanding feelings is not the same as treating feelings as evidence. That distinction is essential in law. Someone may sincerely feel victimized. That doesn't prove that a legal violation occurred, though. The law has to ask what can be established through evidence. Some contemporary legal writers go even further than this. They openly criticize the formalities of common law as products of patriarchy, racism, and historical oppression. Helen Andrews quotes legal journalist Dahlia Lithwick. The American legal system was fundamentally a machine built to privilege propertied white men. What a terrible way to look at the world. You can see what happens when a judicial system is run by feelings in the Title IX tribunal courts that investigated sexual assault cases on university campuses. Innocent until proven guilty was not the working ethos. It was guilty until proven innocent. Once feelings begin functioning as evidence, the system becomes almost impossible to challenge. Every response can be absorbed into the presumption of guilt. That is what makes this so Kafkaesque. You're first declared guilty. The charge is vague, and the process exists only to formalize it. All of this can be fixed within a generation. We don't need to take women's vote away or usher them back into the kitchen. I enjoy what I do today. I obviously enjoy my intellectual pursuits and sharing my ideas on this platform. What we need is to take the thumb off the scale, as Helen Andrews suggests. Let's make hiring meritocratic in substance and not just name, and we'll see how it shakes out. Make it legal to have a masculine office culture again, and remove the HR lady's veto power. No more social engineering. No more anti-discrimination laws and artificial quotas. No more DI mandates. No more ridiculous lawsuits. Any society that throws out meritocracy, whether in communist countries that are based on connections, deception, and nepotism, or in woke DI societies, those societies necessarily fail. We need to return to meritocracy, which is a pillar of Western culture and a necessary prerequisite of innovation, economic growth, and a flourishing society. When a society is organized by meritocracy, the most skilled people are able to shine in their fields, furthering society at large, and everyone benefits. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe. Till next time, guys.